have to fall. Some of the other teams, the Irish feel pretty good about themselves. Brad Kelly, somebody was on the hot seat beginning this season, has gotten his Irish 12-0. Business-like approach right now is Jimmy Butler. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It's USC. Got them ready to play. We got those kids to play at a high level today. And today, but a long stretch for us. You know, we were in LA. We were in New York last week. Chicago, we're like an on-Broadway play. But our kids mustered enough and played well in the second half, and perfect part to do. I guess the real question is next week. The conference championship game, and you're waiting to see your fate. All next week, and then get back together on Saturday. We'll see if we're good enough. Understated at first, but then he made his one case in the end again. Hard to imagine. Well, when I got these being jumped by teams. No, but the computer at 10. The playoff hero. Yeah. So it wasn't impossible, but I'll say it for you. Possible is impossible. They're 12-0. Go recruit. Go sit back. Have a big party next Sunday, and see if you're at where you end up. The busy Broadway show is got to refer to. They can take hiatus now for 35 days. In fact, they are in the bracket. They'll be in 5 weeks' time for the semifinals. They have the earth, though. Pretty, not pretty. And they have this. Let's see Notre Dame. BYU wants to play big boy football over the line of scrimmage. They got a run of Hiko and Tom somewhere in the game, along with both tight ends. And they bring a run of Hiko in motion. He ends up being an extra longer than the play side of the run. And that happened to former linebacker. So another this season when he switched up a running back. This goes back down. It's 6 more for the BYU offense.
All right, everyone. Notre Dame has punched its ticket. Yes, and Notre Dame is the first of the 4 participants in the 2018 college football playoff. It wasn't dominant. It was not overwhelming against a team that's been pretty sloppy and pretty underwhelming this year in USC. But Notre Dame traveled cross country went to the LA Coliseum and beat USC, falling behind 10-0 and winning the game 24-17. Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. This is our weekly primetime wrap it up for the weekend show that we bring you each and every weekend with your phone calls as the highlight. 860-325-3687. I'll get that number in the live chat in just a second for those of you who don't know it. 860-325-3687. All right, let's get through the day, and let's go with what we've got right now, as I see that actually in a game that matters little to most of you, most likely, is that BYU is going to be sending Utah to the Pac-12 championship game with a big L, a big old L. 20-0. BYU is an 11-point dog, winning at Utah. So Cougars over the Utes right now, taking another hit to Pac-12 reputation and pride. In the game that mattered toward the college football playoff tonight, USC jumped out 10-0. JT Daniels set a USC all-time completions record for a single game with 37 completions. So think about all the great USC quarterbacks. Arguably the best quarterback producing school in college football. Pat Hayden, Carson Palmer, Todd Marinovich, all the great quarterbacks that USC has produced. Going down through the years, Matt Leinart and Mark Sanchez, on and on and on and on and on. And for one single game, JT Daniels sets the all-time completion record. But if you follow records, you know that most of the completion and attempts record come in losses because you keep throwing the ball in the fourth quarter, and that's what happened to USC when they finally fell behind. Again, they were up 10-0. They made a number of mistakes, and I will release my USC Notre Dame recap as soon as we're done here on our call-in show, because I have taken plenty of notes, and I have taken plenty of notes for too many games this weekend and never shot a recap. So I'm going to put my hard work to use because I watched this one, Notre Dame-USC, with an eye on Clemson, South Carolina in particular, and to a lesser extent, Louisville and Kentucky. Louisville is so awful that they made Kentucky's offense look like Oklahoma or Ohio State today. That's how awful Louisville is. Kentucky was the team that, regardless of what the point spread was, you always took the other team. You still thought Kentucky would win the game, but that they would never cover the spread because they could never score enough points, i.e. 15-14 against Mizzou, 14-7 against Kentucky, but against Louisville, 56 points. That's how much of a wreck the Louisville program is, and will probably be placed in the capable hands of Jeff Brom. All right, back to college football playoff talk. How impressive was Notre Dame tonight? I don't believe they needed to be impressive. They're undefeated and played a reputable schedule, a schedule that could have been daunting, could have been amazing, could have been ridiculously tough had Stanford, Virginia Tech, Florida State not been off their games this year. Their biggest win, of course, was week 1 against Michigan at home by a touchdown. Of course, the Ohio State win is big news because it looks as though if the favorites win next weekend, then it's going to be a competition between Oklahoma and Ohio State for the final playoff spot. And going into this weekend, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee was giving Oklahoma all sorts of street cred over Ohio State in the 6th spot over the 10 spot. I didn't necessarily, despite Ohio State's bad loss against Purdue and Oklahoma's understandable last-second loss to Texas, did I think that Oklahoma was that much better on the resume than Ohio State because the Buckeyes had better performances against better teams and hadn't just been annihilated on defense week after week after week after week. And as we had discussed all week, that Ohio State, because of the expectations of the defense being elite and then it being marginal to bad, it being given less credit than outperforming the Oklahoma defense. And then the Oklahoma offense being considered the best in college football, which is fine. Statistically, it is. And it probably is. Probably the deciding factor between the Oklahoma and the Ohio State offense would be Kyler Murray on his feet versus Dwayne Haskins on his feet. There's no comparison. Kyler Murray is Michael Vick, and Dwayne Haskins is, well, at least in the last few weeks, he's been better than Drew Bledsoe. He's at least been serviceable and able to keep a defense honest with his legs. And that's something that has really been key to Ohio State winning the past few weeks, is that they've gotten Dwayne Haskins out on the perimeter, and he's actually kept the RPO a number of times and ran the ball 15 times last week against Maryland, did a number of times for decent significant gains, like 5 and 6 yard gains against the Michigan defense today. I cut a video earlier today and posted just after the gun, Ohio State and Michigan. And my full thoughts are right there, a full like 20 or 25 minutes on Ohio State and Michigan. I also took notes on the Iron Bowl. I should probably do a recap on that. I've got thoughts about the Iron Bowl, although unlike Ohio State, Michigan, and to a certain extent USC and Notre Dame, haven't we seen this exact game out of Alabama about 5 times this year against decent teams? Auburn, Mississippi State, LSU, Texas A&M. I think it's been the same game out of Alabama. They're just a lot better. And Auburn stayed within 17-14 at half. I believe that was the score at half. Yes. After the double pass by Ryan Davis for the touchdown to make it, 17-14. So it was somewhat interesting, even though the Tide was the much better team in the first half. Auburn took advantage of some plays here and there to keep it close at 17-14, but it got out of hand rather quickly. Final, Bama wins 52-21 and covers the spread. Speaking of covering the spread, despite Notre Dame moving on to the college football playoff at a perfect 12-0 and finishing the regular season at 12-0 for the first time since 2012, and that connection, of course, to Alabama. USC scoring in the final 30 seconds of the game to make it 24-17, as Notre Dame was an 11-point favorite. Fortunately, I took USC with the 11 points. All right, let's see what's in the live chat, and we'll talk up college football. Anything else that you guys would like to discuss? LSU is this year's Penn State. They're in the top 10, but they're dead. They're dead in the water. They really are not a factor. They've lost 2 games. They can't get to a conference championship game, and therefore they're given credit for playing really well against good teams and beating most of them, but having 2 losses and not getting to a conference championship game, and that being sealed 2, 3, 4 weeks before the end of the season. LSU is this year's Penn State. In the top 10, but no path to get to the championship or the Final Four. So LSU, I would expect, is going to get passed by Ohio State. This is my guess, is that Ohio State goes to number 6. UCF won, but lost Mackenzie Milton. They didn't beat a good team in South Florida, who's 7-5 with 5 consecutive losses. A group of 5 team cannot be compared to a Power 5 team that's especially rated in the top 4 in the country. So Ohio State, only 1 spot back of UCF, should blow right by them. Washington State, of course, lost, as we projected and predicted. Not that I get all my predictions right. I didn't mean to claim it like that with my chest out, like, of course I made the prediction. But Washington State has become fairly predictable, because regardless of what Washington State does up until that Apple Cup game, Washington has superior athletes, better athletes, faster athletes, stronger athletes, and then they prove it on the field against Washington State, and they did so again last night in the snow in Pullman to make it to the Pac-12 championship game. So Ohio State's going to blow by them. And then the other team I would think would be, even though LSU, last I checked, Texas A&M had kicked a field goal in overtime to tie LSU 34-all. That's the last I've seen. You guys can give me an update on the LSU-Texas A&M game. But even if LSU beats a decent team on the road, I would think Ohio State's going to surpass them, and especially with the Northwestern win. And if Ohio State loses to Northwestern, then it doesn't matter. They're out. So Ohio State's going to pass LSU, or they're going to lose and not be a factor. So they're going to be number 5. And then it's going to come down to the committee weighting the Michigan win over the Oklahoma versus West Virginia win. And then the Oklahoma win, they, of course, have to win over Texas to avenge their 1 loss. versus Ohio State's win over Northwestern. Fortunately for the Buckeyes, despite Pat Fitzgerald playing a bunch of second stringers in the second half and telling his offensive and defensive coordinators in the second half when they wanted to put the first stringers in the lineup against Illinois, no, we've taken them out. We're not playing them. We're resting them up for the Big Ten championship game. That Northwestern, despite Illinois driving down the field in the final minutes, getting the ball inside the 10-yard line, that Northwestern held on for the win at 24-16 over the awful Fighting Illini. Otherwise, Ohio State would have had to face a 7-5 Northwestern team that just lost to Illinois in the Big Ten championship game. And despite resting some starters, some key starters in the fourth quarter, and even earlier than that, I don't think the College Football Playoff Committee would have taken much of that into consideration. So, fortunately for the Buckeyes, Northwestern shows up at 8-4. They were ranked number 19 in the rankings before this win, so they shouldn't drop, I wouldn't think. They'll probably hold steady close to number 19. So it's going to be not a huge lift for Ohio State in the conference championship game like it would Oklahoma over Texas, but a bit of a lift against a respectable team in Northwestern. All right, let's get to the live chat. And again, the number is 860-325-3687. We still have two meaningful college football games being played right now, with BYU dominating Utah as the Utes are headed to the Pac-12 championship game. Of course, this game has nothing to do with the conference race. It is the Holy War. And then we also have Boise State taking on Utah State. I've got that game on DVR. A number of people have asked me in recent weeks about Utah State and Boise State, my thoughts about those two teams. I saw Utah State play some against Michigan State, and that's been it. I've seen Boise State play quite a bit the last 2 weeks. Fresno State, and I can't remember the other game that I watched them play, but I didn't take notes. I didn't really take it in. I was working while I was watching. So this is going to be the game that if it takes me until 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to watch Boise State and Utah State and have an evaluation on those two teams. All right, somebody's calling in at 860-325-3687. We'll start our college football playoff chat, or whoever you want to talk to and talk about. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. Michael Hoke. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, Michael. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Just got a little bit of cough. Still shocked about the Michigan-Ohio State game today. How Ohio State straight dominated them.
They sure did. They blasted them.
All right. I won't be on there long because I know you got other people probably going to call in, but just when you get your options about 3 bowl choices, either the Pinstripe Bowl, the Music City Bowl, or the Little Caesars Bowl in Detroit.
You know, I should do a much better job for you guys late in the season. I'm going to learn my lesson one of these weeks because you guys are starved for bowl projections. And I have yet to release a video with any kind of bowl projections. And I should do that just to self-service myself because you guys clamor for bowl projections every week. And I really don't know. So I'm thinking, so you mentioned the Insight Bowl. You mentioned the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl in Detroit. Are we talking about the Quick Lane Bowl? They've changed names.
I think so. That and the Pinstripe Bowl.
And the Pinstripe Bowl. And the Pinstripe Bowl. And you're bringing in the Music City Bowl. So Purdue's at 6-6. Minnesota's 6-6. I'm going to think that Minnesota is going to get despite winning head-to-head with Purdue, Purdue's a more attractive because of Rondell Moore, because of the pass offense of David Blau. I believe that Purdue is going to get snatched up before Minnesota, again, despite the head-to-head win by the Gophers. So I would think that the Gophers are going to be the final seed for the Big Ten and that Purdue is going to get snatched up before that. So whatever the rankings are, and we can look those up after we get off the phone, I'll give you some kind of projection of how they should lay out for the Big Ten. I was very surprised by Minnesota beating with Wisconsin the way they did today. I threw a poll on Twitter and listed Wisconsin as one of the most disappointing teams of this season. But, yeah. So Purdue was able to beat Indiana and get to a bowl game. So, yeah, one of those destinations.
Did you get to catch Jeff Trump's post-game comment?
I did not.
No, he said he's pretty adamant about staying in Purdue, but like I said, I just speak Coach B. What was your last thing? What was your impression about how Auburn yacked it up in the last 2 minutes before halftime in the Alabama game, only down by 3 points, I think it was.
Well, you're talking about when they got the ball and they kind of sat on it?
Yeah.
Well, if I remember correctly, they got the ball about the 15-yard line, so they didn't have good field position, and Gus Malzahn must have been very happy and content with only being down to Alabama by 3 points at halftime. So I didn't have a huge issue with that because you can go one of two ways on that. I think to win a game like that, to have a chance to beat a team that's so much better than you, you have to take risks, but they have to be calculated risks. And when you're running out the clock for the half, then you've got an end in sight, meaning we can make it to the locker room and only be down 3, versus at other times in the game when you're taking risks, the clock keeps running and there's no buffer to protect you, if you follow me. So, for example, on a 4th and 2 play, they ran that really gimmicky, tricky, fun to watch play, but it didn't work because they threw it out to the punter in the right flat. And even though when he caught the ball, it looked like he was all by himself, he was up against an Alabama special teams unit that was so much faster than him that he just got slammed out of bounds about a yard short. But it was a good-looking play, but it just didn't work. But I understand at that part of the field why they would do that. But I don't know why they just, at 4th and 2, it was like 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, why Auburn just wouldn't run their offense and put the ball in the hands of Stidham to make a good decision or run for a first down, instead of letting somebody catch the ball and have to run for a first down who's a punter and the slowest guy on the field. That, I thought, was a good decision in terms of going for it, but a bad decision in regards to how you executed and what decision you made in terms of a play call. Looks like LSU won.
Mark.
All right, Michael, I appreciate the call. You have a great night. I believe I'm seeing that LSU won tonight against Texas A&M in overtime. I think that's what we see here. Let me check out the live chat here and see what you guys have in store. Plenty of comments here. Let me get arranged here. Next purchase may be, depending on what happens with a few issues that are up ahead for me. We may get into that at some point when it's not a college football night. I'll buy a bigger desk. Need a bigger desk. Got the water, got papers all over the place, got a laptop in front of me, got the stack of books with the other laptop. All right, let's get to the live chat here. And first and foremost, I'm going to put the number in here, which is, of course, 860-325-3687. Okay. What do you guys have for me? George is here. Terry Ann is in. Got to feel good about another Iron Bowl win, avenging last year's loss. George L., new to Mark Rogers TV. I have just noticed George L., not to be confused with the original George, Gators fan, but George L. Has brought a number of interesting comments to the chat in recent days. Notre Dame barely survives, will get dismantled by Clemson. I would not be surprised by that. Terry Ann, OSU showed out today. Navy Thomas, nice win. George, yes, Florida over Florida State. The Seminoles do not make a bowl game for the first time since 1981. Over the next several days, what I would like to do is take all the teams that did not make bowl games, especially the big blue blood prominent programs like Nebraska and Florida State, and look at their personnel, who's coming back for 2019, and do a very early preseason look for 2019 for Nebraska and Florida State in particular. Also, because of the Les Miles hire, an interesting look there at Kansas. They suddenly have become an intriguing program. All right. Looks like I missed a call. I'm sorry. 860-325-3687. Sometimes the mouth doesn't work. That happens. I think that happens to all of us, right? And I think I'm starting down that path tonight. All right. So good win for the Gators. They finish up at 9-3. Probably will make a New Year's Eve 6 game. George thinks OSU will jump into the top 6, I think, as well. He's looking top 5. Okay, I don't think they're going to pass Oklahoma at this point. Maybe they will, but from 10 to 5, considering that Oklahoma beat West Virginia, who was ranked in the top 12 or 13 in the country, that's not likely. All right, Cash Boy D in the chat. Navy Thomas got himself a blizzard warning and a Nebraska loss this weekend. That's not good. We got Brody on the line. Good to hear from you. Playoff bound. Who is your team? Oh, it's obviously the Irish. I see the avatar now. George L. Vegas line is 21 points over Georgia, and that's being nice. 21 points over Georgia. Let that sink in. So Alabama was a 24 or 25-point favorite against Auburn, and they cleared it with a 31-point win. They were a 24 or 25-point favorite against Mississippi State, and they basically came close to covering. I was fortunate enough to get 25 points, so I was in good shape in a 24-0 Bama win, but they basically covered that game or came very close to it. They were just a 14-point favorite against LSU, and of course they won by 29. They covered or came very close to covering against Texas A&M, a very capable team again. Alabama is dismantling teams that are not elite teams, but between LSU, Mississippi State, Auburn, and Texas A&M, we're talking about legitimate top 15 to 20 teams in the country, and they are beating them all by basically 4 touchdowns. And now they are playing Georgia, who's a cut above those other teams, even though they lost at LSU. You would put LSU and Georgia roughly in the same category, and based on what the Bulldogs have shown us since the LSU game, I would think that they're a little bit better than LSU, a lot more explosive. That game was on the road in Baton Rouge. I think Georgia is a little better than LSU. So I am swaying toward the 21 points in Georgia, but I am not that confident in that selection because we saw in a 17-14 game at halftime, Alabama turned that into a 31-point rout like that. And they, like Clemson tonight against South Carolina, do not let off the throttle. They may take some guys out of the game, but they don't run out the clock until there's like 45 seconds left in the game. Clemson was throwing the ball downfield, and they were giving the ball to Travis Etienne and had their number 1 playmakers in the game, and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, winning by 4 touchdowns against South Carolina halfway through the 4th quarter. That didn't happen even 5 years ago before the playoff. I don't know what Clemson needs to do that for, but that's fine. I think it's a competitive situation. Maybe they want to prove a point. Maybe they just want to drive the nail in the coffin against the South Carolina team that they hate, that's their bitter rival, and say, hey, we're not going to let you score on us and make the score look more respectable. We're going to blow you out. I don't know what the incentive is there. They don't need the work. They're risking injury. They don't need it to impress the playoff selection committee. They need to win next week against Pitt. If they don't, they're probably out anyway. But if they win by 1 point, they're in. So I didn't understand that out of Clemson, but I'm not going to go crazy about it. I'm not going to unduly criticize it. It's a competitive situation. They're all student athletes playing at the very highest level of competition. So I don't feel sorry for anyone. If you don't like it, stop them. I wouldn't play like that. If I've got a 4-touchdown lead with 5 minutes left in the game, I've got my backup quarterback in the game. I'm not risking my starter getting hurt. I've got backup wide receivers and running backs, even for just the experience of the moment playing in a rivalry game for my backups, and for all the hard work that they put into practice, and for their reps, for their development, for future games if somebody gets hurt, or for next year, I'm putting them in the game. That's what I would do. And if we win 49-35 instead of 56-35, who cares? But Dabo Swinney's making a whole lot of more money than I am. All right. Can't wait till Notre Dame gets blown out by Clemson. B Guns X Nebula. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We appreciate you jumping on board. This is the place for the best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. We appreciate seeing you for the first time. You're obviously I'm going to guess, USC fan. And I also picked up a contribution from somebody. I will take notice of that in just a second when I figure out who that is. But I appreciate that very much. Thank you so much. Terry Ann has not seen the betting line. Brody, aha. Navy Thomas, depends on the placement as to who plays who. Zachary, this is the first time I've seen you in the live chat. Zachary, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. What's up, Mark? Love the show, and I've been listening for a few years now. You sound like a real broadcaster. I try not to sound like a real broadcaster, and I've had a few people criticize me for trying to sound like a broadcaster. Not any of you, actually people in my life, but this is how I talk, so I'm not trying to. But yes, in a former life, I was a real broadcaster. I think I've laid out the bio before. You guys don't want to hear it tonight. We're talking about college football and playoff committee selections. But thank you. I appreciate that, Zachary. And thanks for watching. And for those of you people out there that that never comment, that's fine. If you just want to watch, that's great. I'm not going to beg and plead for somebody to make comments. I would ask that you would comment maybe just once and say, I'm here, like Zachary just did, and say, I don't feel like commenting most of the time or ever. I just like to watch and listen, watch the chat, listen to you. And I'm not going to comment myself, but just for my own curiosity, I like to know who's watching, who you root for, how long you've been watching, and maybe just say, hey, Mark, been watching for 2 years. I'm a big Rutgers fan. I would love to know if I have any Rutgers fans watching. Navy Thomas 1-4-2 versus 3. George L. You guys are calling out number one ND fan. Mark, I just saw the most ridiculous advertisement before your video came on. Uh-oh. Is YouTube putting ridiculous video ads on my stream here? Most likely will be Clemson and Notre Dame if Clemson wins next week. LSU going into triple OT. And again, I think they won that game. William Smith was keeping track of LSU and Texas A&M. Matthew James, I hate the SEC. USC just needs a decent coach, and they are top 4. Well, that could be a bit of a stretch. But yes, I think we saw a lot of good things out of USC. That leads me to think, even though I think there's a whole lot of reason and sense to the theory that these teams can only get up several times a year. They can't play an A game with maximum effort. Ohio State couldn't take the effort that they displayed against Michigan and lay that out on the field every week. Therefore, if they would have done what they did today, last week at Maryland, they would have annihilated Maryland, much like Penn State did today. And Penn State's not even nearly as good as Ohio State. And Penn State beat Maryland 38-3. Maryland was probably exhausted and just kind of taking a bit of a letdown after they laid it all on the line against Ohio State. So that's why we've got to take that sometimes into consideration with these games. My point being, that USC should be much better than 5-7. So we know that USC has better talent than 5-7. They have the best roster in that division. So maybe Clay Helton, as I mentioned to somebody this week when asked, I would take a different approach with Clay Helton because I typically think that even with an elite program where elite results are expected, that I typically give a coach one mulligan of a season. So let's say you're Clay Helton. You take over, you finish out 2015, you come back in 2016, you get off to a rough start, you rally with Sam Darnold at quarterback. When you finally make the right decision at quarterback, you win the Rose Bowl. your top 5 next season to start the season. You don't necessarily meet those expectations, but you do win the Pac-12 championship and get to the Cotton Bowl, but you get blown out by Notre Dame and Ohio State. And then you come in this season and a downer. And much of that was expected because of the JT Daniels situation in replacing Darnold. But still, these other programs that we talk about on a regular basis would not collapse with a freshman quarterback, but USC did this year. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, this is Chad.
Hey, Chad. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Just been watching this Texas A&M LSU game.
Okay, you got to tell me what's going on then.
So,
You need to tell me what's going on then.
all right. Well, LSU just scored a touchdown but missed a 2-point conversion. And Kellen Mond just ran the ball all the way to the LSU 2-yard line.
Oh, wow, 58-52. So if Texas A&M scores, man, I'm looking out for myself here, Chad, because I picked LSU with the 3 points. So I'm good with Texas A&M. I actually picked Texas A&M to win the game, and I took the 3.5 points with LSU. So it would be great if Texas A&M actually scored, won the game with the 2-point conversion, or just the I guess they just need the PAT. Oh no, they got to go for 2. We're in 5 overtimes here. Wow, I'm looking at this now. Okay, yeah, it looks like a great game. Wow, that's amazing. I don't have the SEC network. Do you have a rooting interest in this game? Are you pulling for anyone in this game?
I just wanted to see. I knew this game was going to be pretty good, so I pretty much wanted to watch this one.
Heck yeah.
But I thought at the time Texas A&M might pull the upset.
Well, they're actually a favorite. Texas A&M was a 3.5-point favorite in this game.
That's incomplete. That's $14 right now. But what you thought about the Iron Bowl so far?
What did I think? I think this was pretty much the script that Alabama throws out against all the decent teams that they play. This was almost a carbon copy of the Texas A&M game. In particular, it was mostly like the Texas A&M game. I thought that Auburn did pretty much what they could possibly do to stay in the game. The only 2 things that I saw that Auburn do that they could have done better is, unfortunately, I had targeted Seth Williams as a key factor in this game, that Jarrett Stidham would really need Seth Williams to play close to what he's done in recent weeks and be the big play receiver they needed. And he dropped some passes. The Auburn receivers dropped passes. They could have extended drives. That's the one thing that happened in this game that really didn't show Bama dominance. It was more Auburn giving them gifts in not extending drives. But other than that, Alabama dominated as expected, and especially defensively. Auburn just doesn't have the running game to balance out the attack to have Alabama respect the run. And so therefore Jarrett Stidham's throwing off his back foot every play because the rush is in his face almost instantly. That what I am amazed at in watching the Alabama defense. So I go from watching Ohio State and Michigan, in which Ohio State, despite giving up 39 points, played a superior defensive game most of the game, and they were flying around making tackles. And then I flip on Alabama, and I'm watching the Tide go after guys and run down plays from the backside and chase down slip screens. And I'm thinking, I see this out of Alabama every week. They have such tremendous speed, team speed on defense, and they do not miss tackles. It is such a sound tackling defense. Watching Alabama football, and you don't see that watching most college football games. You see a lot of poor tackling. You see guys flying by other guys. They don't break down and tackle. Alabama's an exceptional tackling defense.
Now, did you see the play where, well, like Auburn was scoring around a 75-yard touchdown, but Auburn got called for 2 flags, one for obviously the holding, but The other one kind of confused me with the whole unsportsmanlike conduct for arguing a call, because I've seen it before, you know, where coaches arguing calls. I didn't think it'd be unsportsmanlike conduct.
When was that in the game?
Okay, it was. I know Auburn had the ball in very good position, and sent him hand off to the running back, and he went 75 yards up the field for looked like it was going to be a touchdown, but got called back for a holding. Auburn held, and then Malzahn was arguing the call with the referee, and then he got flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. And I kind of got confused. I'm like, you know, we see this all the time where coaches argue about calls all the time.
Yeah, so maybe he was on the field. Urban Meyer got called for that today. He was on the field arguing. Maybe it was the position of where he was on the field. Either he was too far down the sideline or he was on the field. I don't know how I missed that play, because I missed most of the first quarter. Because the
yeah, it was during the first quarter.
Oh, okay, that's how I missed it. I'm looking at my notes and I don't remember that play. Okay, I'm going to go back and watch that. So do you think that the holding call was a good call?
Oh, the holding call, what I saw was a freaking call. I just didn't think the whole sportsmanlike conduct where, you know, coaches argue calls all the time, you know.
Sure.
I just thought maybe that's a little ticky-tacky right there.
So basically, because of the holding call plus the unsportsmanlike, they're giving Auburn like a second and a zillion to go.
It was actually a replay of first down. It ended up being like 1st and 27 down at the Auburn 8-yard line.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big call. Otherwise, it's, well, it looked like he gained yardage, so they were calling it from the spot foul. And so 1st and 27. So it would have been like 1st and 12. So it wouldn't have been that huge of a deal otherwise. Yeah. Other than wiping out a touchdown. But in terms of putting them behind the sticks, yeah, I hate to see stuff like that, because it just alters a drive, and they only have so many drives in the game. And if the officials, maybe they give Gus Malzahn a warning and say, you know what, back off. Yeah. And we don't want you doing this, whatever he was doing. Maybe he was cussing at them. Maybe he was on the field, whatever, and just take into account, this is huge. We are basically stopping a drive if we throw a 15-yard penalty on Gus Malzahn, and we don't want to alter the game that much. Give him a warning and go on from there.
And I think in another game, I don't know if you see any of the Florida State Florida game.
Yes.
But did you see the end when he was giving Dan Mullen's giving an interview?
Oh, I heard about this. They were trying to plant the flag in the at the 50-yard line, the Florida flag.
Yeah, and on the logo actually of Florida State.
Yep.
And I think Dan Mullen should be congratulated for telling his players basically to back off.
I agree.
And I knew some of the commentators say, yeah, you got to have class and these kind of things. I was hoping one of them would say, let's not pull another Baker Mayfield.
So I'm not that critical of the kids, because they are kids, and I would hope that my son would be a little classier than that. But if he wasn't, I would only have a talk with him. I wouldn't be completely ashamed of him and think, oh, this is just the worst thing in the world. They are kids. They're 18 to 22 years old. So they need to learn some sportsmanship and to be classy. But I do like that Dan Mullen, and I would like to see the video of it. I only heard about it. I only read about it because I watched the guy.
Him and Willie Taggart are backing off their players.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a pretty good move. And then speaking of Carolina and Clemson, I was kind of shocked that South Carolina put 35 points. That's, I figured, maybe South Carolina only puts up 7 like they did last year, but.
And think about this. Chad, not only did they put up 35 points, they drove the ball inside the 5-yard line twice in the first half, where they could have put some real pressure on Clemson, and they went for it both times. And I understand Will Muschamp's mentality that they're this good, they're going to put up a ton of points, we got to do this to keep up with them. But they could have kicked field goals, or if they would have just made the other 3 yards, they would have put up 2 more touchdowns. You know, they drove the length of the field inside the 5 and came up empty. Otherwise, they would have put up 49 points on that defense.
Yeah. Now, do you think this is going to be more of the same that we're going to see next week against Pitt?
Oh, boy. Pitt could only score 3 points today against, they lost to Miami 24-3, and they could do nothing on offense. I had that game on another monitor. I wasn't like zoned in on it, but yeah, boy, Pitt's a very ground-oriented team. They have very little to stretch the field. Clemson's going to just gang up on the run and just stuff the run and just challenge them to throw the ball downfield. And yeah, that game has, 45-10 written all over it.
Yeah.
45-14, something in that range.
Yeah, that's going to be the primetime game next weekend, too.
Yeah, well, I will probably be a little bit more invested in the Big Ten championship game, and I think the SEC plays at more like 3:30 or 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
So my priority is going to be the Big 12 at noon, and then the SEC, and then the Big 10. And I would have to see that Pitt's hanging in the third quarter. I'll put it on a laptop or something on the side, but I'll be focused on the Big 10, I would think.
So basically, every conference championship game is set right now.
Yes.
With the exception of Mountain West.
Yeah, so right now we've got Boise State and Utah State playing. The last I saw, the Broncos were up 10-7.
Oh, yeah, an update on Texas A&M LSU. Texas A&M did get a touchdown, missed the 2-point conversion. They came back into 6 overtime, scored a touchdown, and made the 2. So LSU's got the ball, got to score a touchdown and 2.
Wow, I see that. 66-58. I don't know that the Texas A&M LSU basketball game this year, or I guess they play 2, home and home, will be this high scoring. 66.
I remember,
and LSU just scored a touchdown.
They showed a little stat talking about the Ole Miss Arkansas game back in 2001. I remember.
Oh yeah.
As a kid, staying up to watch that whole game.
Oh, you were a kid. That makes me feel old. Arkansas back-to-back years played ridiculously long games. I think it was like 02-03. What did you say the Kentucky game was? What year?
The Kentucky game was 2003.
Okay, it might have been the year before. The year before, yeah, because I started working at ESPN in 01. So I was at ESPN for both of those games. I think definitely the Kentucky game, but Arkansas, strangely enough, played 2 of the longest games in history. Maybe not back-to-back seasons, but within 3 or 4 seasons. And yeah, the second one was the Kentucky game, and I specifically remember being at work and working on that game. And that was some like crazy, something like this, like 66-64, something like that.
Yeah, the craziest overtime game I actually do remember was the 2003 Alabama-Tennessee game when it went 5 overtime.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of injuries happened in that game, too.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, okay, Mike Sheila's not going to have too bad of a career.
Well, they started overtime play in 1997, and then they determined after they got some crazy games in like that they had to force the 2-point conversion. Otherwise, teams would just keep scoring because the defenses are worn out and just keep kicking extra points, and they would never end the game. Yeah, November.
So is there a limit to the overtime where they can play, or
I don't think so.
Or is it? Oh, okay.
I'm
just kind of wondering.
Here you go. Arkansas 71, Kentucky 63, 7 overtimes, 2003.
I remember that Ole Miss one. One was pretty crazy too.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but usually an Arkansas Ole Miss game has been pretty good anyway.
Yeah, they've played some great games through the years. Definitely. Definitely.
Now with, I know some people asking what team can afford not to lose their conference championship game to make the playoff. Do you think you have an answer?
Well, Alabama would be the first choice. And then Clemson would be the second choice. For obvious reasons, they're both undefeated. And Alabama's considered the best team in the country, and Clemson's considered the second best. And Alabama's playing by far the better team than Clemson. So if Alabama loses a field goal game to Georgia, there is going to be a heck of an argument in that room between the people that are going to want to hold fast to conference champions and those that will say, we just want to select the 4 best teams, and Alabama is one of the 4 best teams. So even if we have to kick out Ohio State or Northwestern or Oklahoma, that's what we're going to have to do. And LSU has scored a touchdown and made the 2-point conversion to make it 66 all.
Yeah, they just showed a bowl projection for LSU if they won it, which is going to be any one of the 3 New Year's Six games.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what they're playing for.
It being the Sugar Bowl, to be honest, because if they're going geography purpose, I seriously doubt they do.
Yeah, even with this college football playoff committee kind of messing, not the committee, but the system kind of messing up a lot of the bowl tie-ins, I like to see it stay as traditional as possible. So I like to see the SEC playing the Sugar Bowl. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel the same. It's the Sugar Bowl. There should be an SEC team there.
I know the way I've seen it, they had it project like LSU go to the Sugar, Georgia to the Peach, and Florida to the Fiesta. And I was thinking to myself, Florida versus Central Florida would be a good game if Milton was healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough deal for them because there's going to be a lot of thought given to that, and obviously they're not given certain amounts of respect from many of those people, even with him in play, and then with him out of play. Yeah, that's kind of a tough call to make because you want to reward them for having an outstanding season, but they're not nearly the team. I think they're still capable. They still scored against South Florida, but that's a whole different deal, obviously, against that level of defense.
And then the way I'm seeing it, they're talking about Kentucky being the highest SEC team to not go to a New Year's Six bowl.
So yeah, Kentucky finishes at 9-3. So that's an interesting call there because, of course, they won the head-to-head against Florida. But Florida's just a more attractive matchup, and that's the way the world works. And so Kentucky kind of gets screwed there. They should win the tiebreaker against a Florida in that situation, but they don't. So, I've seen projections. What are we looking at here? I'm trying to find one right here. Kentucky.
I did disagree with people talking about Michigan not going to New Year's Six. I think Michigan's going to New Year's Six. That's the way I think about it.
Well, I can't imagine that Florida's going to go to a New Year's Six bowl game at 9-3 and Michigan won't. I would be shocked if Michigan doesn't get to a New Year's Six bowl game.
I know one of the analysts on Fox said, they're going to like the Outback Bowl or something. I said, I don't think they'll disrespect Michigan like that.
I don't think so either. And again,
one of the Ohio State will probably go to the Rose Bowl if they don't make the playoff.
Yep.
Because that would be a good matchup, Ohio State and Washington, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be.
Two contrasting styles.
And we know once they get past the playoff, well, some people would argue even in the playoff, they're looking for the most popular teams. But past the playoff, without stretching too far, they're going to go for the most popular teams, and Michigan is certainly one of them. They bring eyeballs to the TV screen. So, and they're 10-2, and they were just number 4. They're going to drop to whatever 8th or 9th in the rankings, but they're still going to be highly ranked. They'll be in the New Year's Six.
Yeah. And then, do you think another 12 team will get a shot, or it's just Oklahoma?
Oh, would another Big 12 team get what shot at the New Year's Six?
Like a New Year's Six. I'm just wondering.
Of course, if Texas wins, they have to go to the New Year's Six as a conference champion. They're going to be included as a conference champion. It's just like if Northwestern beats Ohio State, they're going to go to the Rose Bowl with 4 losses.
Oh.
Yes, they're the Big Ten champion. They will go to the Rose Bowl. So Texas will go probably to the Fiesta Bowl if they win. Now, if Oklahoma wins, then there's nobody else in play. West Virginia is only 8-3. And Texas will have 4 losses at that point. So the Big 12 is going to be out of it other than OU.
I just don't see another ACC team.
No. So
Pac-12.
Yeah, it's a good call.
Well, maybe Washington State.
Sure, Washington State. Only 2 losses. Penn State is even in play at 9-3, much like Florida at 9-3. And Penn State brings a lot of people, and they bring a lot of eyeballs to the TV screen. So Penn State is in play as well.
It should be very interesting.
Oh, yeah, it always is. I love this time of year. And we've got our championship weekend all in play, and we'll see what happens.
All right. Thanks.
All right, Chad, we appreciate the call. (860-325-3687). 860-325-3687. So I watched Ohio State, Michigan, of course, and I posted a video with my recap on the game. That seems to be doing rather well, so I appreciate you checking that out. I was also watching Florida State. That was my secondary game. I watched a little Georgia Tech, but not a whole lot. I was watching, trying to think, that third game, Boston College and Syracuse. I thought was going to be a better game. I expected more out of BC, and they got run all over the field. A.J. Dillon's not right. He's got an ankle issue, and he just has not been himself for several weeks, and that played into it. But credit the Orange. They finish out strong at 9-3, and they will probably have the number 2 seed in the ACC unless that goes to North Carolina State. But Syracuse, of course, won the head-to-head there. All right, 860-325-3687. We always appreciate the phone calls here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we have on the line?
Bash.
Hey, Bash, what's going on?
Well, big weekend in college football, and I'm watching this game, seeing Ed Orgeron flip out. And you said you don't have SEC Network, so real quick, like about a minute or two, because this has been crazy. Do you want to just know the highlights of what's been going on throughout this game?
Sure.
All right. So Texas A&M had the ball late in regulation. They were down 31-24. They were down by 7. Kellen Mond, on a bad snap, fumbles a snap. He picks it up, throws the desperation heave, picked by Grant Delpit. LSU actually gave Ed Orgeron a Gatorade bath, and then they reviewed it. When Kellen Mond went to pick up the ball, his knee hit the ground. His knee was down, so then Texas A&M got another shot. Next thing you know, he hits a big completion down the field to Courtney Davis. With 3 seconds left, they hustled to the line of scrimmage, spike it, clock expired, reviewed it, added a second, and on the last play of regulation, they scored a touchdown. Then Jimbo Fisher elected to kick the field goal. And then just basically throughout overtime, they've been just matching each other. Right now it's 72-72. Texas A&M's going for 2 for the win. But Kendrick Rogers, you remember him from the Clemson game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's made 4 magnificent grabs in this overtime. One that was just unbelievable. So you'll definitely probably go back and watch some replays of that. You will definitely see that catch because it was one of the greatest catches of the college football season. So I'll update you on what happened on this 2-point conversion. There was a pass interference actually on Rogers by Greedy Williams that just happened. So half the distance to the goal. Texas A&M's going for it again. So, oh wow, Greedy Williams got an unsportsmanlike. Okay, so they're at the 3/4 yard line.
Wow.
Anyway, where's your uncalled timeout? Okay. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Ohio State, Oklahoma probably for the next 2 weeks, and that's debate. And I think today should solidify that if Ohio State does go and play against Northwestern, which is a quality opponent, nothing's a given, especially because Northwestern did give Michigan trouble at home and gave Notre Dame trouble at home.
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern's not a team to take lightly. Neither is Texas, of course, because they beat Oklahoma. So I'm just playing the game of if these teams win as they are favored to win. If that's the case, and then they win like we're expecting, Oklahoma in the shootout, maybe a close game, but it wins by 7-10 points, and Ohio State wins by 15 to 20 points like they should. And I don't know what the Vegas lines are opening up, or at least if they're out, I don't think they are. You have to go with Ohio State. That was solidified today. Michigan all season long has not allowed more than 24 points, and they allowed 62 against that Ohio State offense. When Ohio State's clicking, they're just as good as anyone in the country. Now, that's when they're clicking, but you got to think that when Ohio State's going to be going into a playoff situation, and I know people are going to bring up 2016, and that was a different team than
Sure.
this one. This team seems to show up in big games. Penn State, when they beat Penn State, let's keep in mind they were fully healthy, unlike when they played Michigan, and they've been going through this stretch of games where Tracy McSorley's been super banged up. They've been banged up on the defensive side of the ball as well. Penn State was a really good team at that time. And same thing with TCU. They weren't a top 25 team at that time probably, but they were a top 40 team. They are starting to get back healthy. They won 2 straight games to go to a bowl game. They are starting to look like that form. Jalen Reagor is his speedster. And they figured out quarterback, 2 different quarterbacks as well. And then when you look at Oklahoma, this is now the 5th time Texas A&M just won, by the way, Kendrick Rogers. 74-72.
Wow.
That just happened. Yeah, crazy game. Back to what I was saying. If you look at Oklahoma, this is the 5th time that Oklahoma has allowed 40 or more points. And it's not like they're going up against the greatest offenses in the world with all of these. They allowed 40 to Kansas, and people said, well, that was garbage time. It was a 15-point game. It's not like Oklahoma pulled their starters out of that game. It was never really much of a blowout. They had the game under control, but it wasn't much of a blowout to the point where you're seeing these other teams pull their starters out of the game. And then you got Texas Tech, who has a good offense, but they aren't going bowling. They're 5-7. Oklahoma State just fell to 6-6. So these are average teams that they are struggling against. And then Army's best win is against Buffalo. And I know Buffalo's probably going to win the MAC, but for goodness sakes, it's a MAC. And they went into overtime with them. And if you want to talk about Ohio State not making it because of 1 or 2 games, which is Maryland, in which they were seeming to have looked ahead to the Michigan game a little bit of missing assignments and a lot of the players' issues, and also against Purdue. You can't point to those 2 games as examples for Ohio State to be out of the playoff, because I just pointed out 5 or 6 examples of Oklahoma having a lot of issues that is alarming, and that we've never seen this in the playoff era. Even last year's Oklahoma team was not nearly this bad on defense. And I know how electrifying this offense is for Oklahoma. I know they're about to break a record. Guess who that team that they're about to break the record of yards per play That was Hawaii with Colt Brennan. But were we really considering Hawaii a contender? I don't think so. And at this point in time, it's just getting ridiculous, especially with the committee, that they are valuing Oklahoma so high when Ohio State and Oklahoma have not necessarily comparable offenses. And I know I'm going on a rant. I'll let you respond in just a second. Not necessarily comparable offenses, but they are pretty close. We're talking about number 1 scoring offense and number 2 scoring offense versus the number 46 scoring defense and the number 83rd, which is Oklahoma. So there's a huge problem in the logic for people trying to back up Oklahoma making the playoffs, and I will let you go and respond with that.
Well, Bash, to your point, I'm looking at the Oklahoma-Kansas box score. I didn't watch the game, but I had it on my radar, like I had it on a screen. I was keeping track, much like you. And at one point, deep into the third quarter, Oklahoma was only up 35-24. So that's still a game. And then a little bit later, Kansas scored to cut it to 48-32. So that's still a 2-score game in the fourth quarter. So it was a game. Oklahoma, like you mentioned, had it under control, but Kansas was within 2 scores basically the entire game. And then you can very much parallel the Oklahoma State situation, going for 2 to try to win the game at 48-47 as a 5-win team versus what Maryland was doing against Ohio State, although Oklahoma was at home in Norman and Ohio State was on the road at Maryland. So good points by you. I completely agree. I am not excusing Ohio State's blowout loss against Purdue. That was an awful loss. I'm not excusing the performance the performance in Maryland, but at the same time, you cannot, for some reason, we are hyper-focused and have been for a number of years on Ohio State. And because the expectations are just that they're going to just go out there and roll over teams. And when they don't, a la Alabama, there are criticisms that come from every which direction about everything that's wrong. I heard Urban Meyer mention after the game, and it's very true, that there's supposed to be all these problems with his offense, and they're the number 2 offense in the nation. And all he hears are all these criticisms about the offensive line and the running game. And I've even made those criticisms. But when it's all said and done, in a conference that plays pretty good defense, they are number 2 in the nation in total offense.
Yeah, and that was the point I was making when I was getting in these arguments. And this is the last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to go. And just a closing statement here. When you talk about, gosh, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I guess
we'll give you time, Bash.
I don't know if it'll come back to this.
No. Okay.
I'll think about it. So,
sure.
Real quick, I just want to continue on the Ohio State game, and I just want to make it clear. I'm not trying to be a homer here with talking about this. How Ohio State looked against Michigan, they were dominant against a team that has been dominant all year against maybe not top-tier competition, but some pretty good teams. Some top 40 teams, a lot of top 40 teams in there that Michigan just manhandled, such as Penn State. I wouldn't really say Michigan State anymore, despite the fact that Lewerke was healthy when they played Michigan State, Wisconsin. But the point being is Michigan has played up this revenge tour, and then they lay an egg in Columbus. And I think it partly had to do with Michigan, partly had to do with Ohio State. Ohio State was a better team. Not by that much. But the last thing I'm going to say, I think I got it now, is when you compare Ohio State and Oklahoma, and you tell me that they will play on a neutral field, let's say if chaos happens, Clemson loses, and Alabama beats Georgia, so then you get, I don't know, some way where Oklahoma and Ohio State just hypothetically play in the championship. I don't think that would happen, but let's just say if they were to play on a neutral field, are you seriously telling me that Oklahoma is going to stop Dwayne Haskins, those receivers, more than Ohio State's going to be able to slow down Oklahoma? I don't think so. And that's that's at the end of the day the biggest thing with me. And I also think that Ohio State will compete better with Alabama. They have done it in the past. Thank you for giving me all that time. I couldn't remember what I was saying for a second, but I'll talk to you later, Mark, and I hope that you have a good night.
Thanks, Bash. Have a great night. Appreciate the call. And I'll make my rebuttal to what he had to say concerning Ohio State and Oklahoma. So, yes, I am taking up the flag for Ohio State in this situation just because Oklahoma's rated higher. If it was the other way, believe me, if Oklahoma was rated 10th and Ohio State 6th coming into this week, I would be taking Oklahoma's side because I think the argument is very similar. I don't think that they should be 4 spots different or separated, and certainly won't be this week because of what's happened elsewhere. So the one advantage, if Ohio State and Oklahoma, whether they play or not, if you're comparing the two teams, the first advantage that comes to mind for each team for me is, although Dwayne Haskins is an exceptional quarterback, the passing skills of Haskins versus Murray are very comparable. There is no comparison between the playmaking ability of the two as runners between Murray and Haskins. So Murray has something, and the Oklahoma offense has a component that Ohio State does not. So that's advantage Oklahoma. On the other hand, there is a huge difference, even though Ohio State has let down a couple times this year, namely against Maryland and namely against Purdue defensively. And in other games, they haven't looked great, i.e. Nebraska and TCU. But those are really the two games that they've looked atrocious, against Maryland and Purdue defensively. There is no comparison between the personnel on these two defenses. I know it doesn't show up on the field, and I know that people that belie recruiting rankings are going to be all over this because the production on the field is all that matters. But I think we saw it in a situation like today. Ohio State has elite defenders, and Oklahoma has 2 or 3. Ohio State has 8 or 9. Oklahoma has 2 or 3. Meaning if you went through the entire depth chart of Ohio State players that play and see the field on defense versus Oklahoma, you would see much higher rated high school players for Ohio State. And although we all know that there are high school players who are lowly regarded that turn out to be very strong impact players at the collegiate level, or in the rare exception like a J.J. Watt, turn out to be NFL superstars and Hall of Famers, most of the time the recruiting rankings tell us everything that we need to know about the talent and therefore the performance potential for individual players, but more so units. If you took the 15 players that see the field for the Ohio State defense versus the 15 players that you see for Oklahoma's defense, there's no comparison between their speed, potential, their playmaking ability, their status as determined by scouts coming out of high school. Ohio State has much better defensive personnel than Oklahoma. Murray's running ability is the advantage that Oklahoma has in the comparison of the Oklahoma versus Ohio State offense, but the just flat out better talent is the difference between the Ohio State defense and the Oklahoma defense. All right, I'll stick around if anybody else wants to chime in at 860-325-3687. It appears as though we have one for the ages in this Texas A&M win, 74-72 over LSU. Somebody earlier, at least one LSU fan, I believe 2, called me some kind of name because I picked Texas A&M to win because I was a complete moron. How could I possibly pick a Texas A&M to beat LSU? Apparently, I knew something because Texas A&M actually won the game and LSU covered the 3.5 points. So I had the best of both worlds with the hedge selection pick on that game. LSU with the 3.5 points, Texas A&M as the winner. So that worked out well for me. 860-325-3687. I'm going to check out the live chat to see what you guys are into. As far as I can take this back, It won't let me go all the way. Yeah, it will. Maybe not. Doesn't let me go all the way back. I don't know where we were. Johnny Bays, Notre Dame 12-0, no FCS. To their credit, I always credit Notre Dame's schedule. Now, the schedule didn't turn out to be quite as difficult this year because of Stanford, Virginia Tech, Florida State in particular, not meeting expectations. But Notre Dame's schedule's out of their minds. Now, they should be in a conference, though. But I've got no issues with the schedule. Space farce. Should Dwayne Haskins enter the NFL? I think not. He has one season of starting experience under his belt. Who's more hated, OU or Notre Dame? I think because of winning, because of coaches, because of brand names, because of reputation of favoritism, there are three schools that I think have distinguished themselves as being more hated than others. And I think it's Alabama, Ohio State, and Notre Dame for various reasons. Nick Saban, I'll say what happens. Texas A&M going for 2 a second time. I will say what happens. Don't worry. Okay. I think we're way past that. Israel Kelly's on the line. Boss, hi. My granddad played dominoes with Bear Bryant on his front porch when I was 4 years old. I hardly call myself a bandwagon fan. Absolutely not. You're not. Hey, for any Alabama fan, like I know a few who made it through the 3-8 season 15 years ago and the Mike Dubose years and going way, way back into the 80s, the Ray Perkins seasons that were marginal, not awful, not unbearable, but Bill Curry going 8-4, 9-3. You're a true Alabama fan. Marcus. Notre Dame beats the haters. Yes. Marcus, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Maybe you're still on the line. I would like to know how long you've been watching and who you root for. It appears to be the Irish. Notre Dame is trash. I hate so much to hear that. And you guys know that. Sense of tumor. GOG Cool Gaming. GOG Cool Gaming. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We appreciate you guys. Connor Kane or Coconut Kane and Connor Patris. I'm trying to merge viewer handles now. Connor Patris and Coconut Kane are on the line. Danny Westbrooks, this is the first time I've seen your handle. Appreciate you watching Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Notre Dame has not beaten Ohio State in 83 years. This is true. Yes, this is true. They last met in a famous game in 1935, and Notre Dame won that game. They were down like 13-0, came back and won the game. Then the two teams did not meet until 1995. They played in Columbus, and the Buckeyes won 45-27. Then Notre Dame and Ohio State met the next year in South Bend. Lou Holtz was the coach against John Cooper. Buckeyes won that game. They have since won 2 Fiesta Bowls against Notre Dame in 2006 and 2016. So the Buckeyes have won 4 straight against Notre Dame. Although, much like the Clemson win streak against Ohio State, 1978, 2013, 2016, and you say Ohio State hasn't beaten Clemson in 50 years, they don't play all the time. So it's kind of easy to maintain a winning streak when you don't play for 30 years. So I will afford Notre Dame fans the same disclaimer when stating that Ohio State has not lost to Notre Dame in forever, in 83 years. All right. Who else do we have on here? Anything else that you guys have for me? Notre Dame only beat Michigan by 1 score. Don't see anybody else on the line. Matt Hintz. This is the first time I've seen your handle at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So we appreciate you jumping on board. And thanks so much for the view, the comment, everything else you have for us. Humble Clay, Gallo, Laulu, Alabama all the way. Gallo, thanks so much for joining Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. For any of you who love college football, and I think that at 1 a.m. Eastern time in the morning, that you love college football, if you're on the live chat and you're talking college football, I would just think that this would be one of your destinations. Not that we have to be the only destination. You guys can go all over the place to find some great college football content and debate and discussion and analysis, but I would hope that this would be one of the very first places that you would check out for that. Like, comment, and subscribe if you would. Cameron says LSU at the game 1 and they got cheated from the win. Can't wait to read up on this game. This guy's long-winded. Hopefully you're not talking about me. Jan716, welcome to Mark Rogers TV. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anybody else on the line that's got anything for me. Got LSU Fan 101. Rough night for you. Your defense gave up 72 points. You're as good as Oklahoma. Yes, I am kidding. Wink, wink. Oklahoma gave up 704 yards against West Virginia. Think about that. Oh, my goodness. 704 yards. All right, folks. I will stay on the line for another few minutes. 860-325-3687 if anybody's got anything for me. Otherwise, I'm going to let you know what I've got for you. As I mentioned several minutes ago, I am intrigued by the teams that didn't make bowl games but have interesting outlooks for 2019, and I'm going to look at personnel and see who's coming back. So that means Kansas and Les Miles, intriguing beyond belief. Also, Nebraska and Florida State. Of course, the Seminoles missing a bowl game for the first time since 1981. So I'll be looking at those programs and what they have coming back for 2019. We also had Arizona missing a bowl game with their loss to Arizona State, missing a field goal at the gun in the Territorial Cup. Indiana could not beat Purdue today to get to a bowl game. And here we've got a phone call coming in. We'll see who's on the line.
The call will start at the beep.
Other than that, I'm, of course, going to be previewing and predicting conference championship games this week. Yeah, who do we have on the line?
It's the Beast.
The Beast. How are you?
Yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
How are you? Well, we did not win today.
You didn't?
We lost. We did not win. We lost to Middle Tennessee.
Do you think that the combination of already having the division wrapped up and then also laying it on the line against Texas A&M last week had anything to do with that?
Well, I don't want to say it did, but most likely because we had a bunch of players injured. Our starting quarterback came back. He didn't do very good and got hurt again. Our running back was hurt. A couple of our defensive linemen were hurt. Some of our offensive linemen were hurt. So we have to go back up to Middle Tennessee next week, play for the conference championship instead of playing at home. I think we can beat them this time. We should have our guys healed up, but I don't know. What do you think?
27-3.
Yeah.
So that was a rough one.
Yeah, I think we got like 95 total offensive yards.
Ooh. Well, these kind of situations are also intriguing when two teams play the last regular season game and then hook up in the championship game. I would have to do a little run through history to see if there's any kind of trends that we can find. I think conventional wisdom is that it's difficult to beat a team that's relatively the same as you or close, 2 consecutive games, 2 consecutive weeks. But I don't know if that bears out statistically. Yeah, so your quarterback's 9 for 20 for 90 yards.
Yeah. It was not a very good game at all.
So do you think once this... Were some of those guys left out of the game? I'm just curious about the injury situation. Were some of those guys left out that could have possibly played because of the rematch next week?
Yeah. Spencer only played one. He played one play, and that was it. You know, a lot of us thinking, well, maybe we got the season already wrapped up. Probably some of them are going to sit out. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I would have liked for them to win the game to play it here.
Yeah.
At UAB, but instead of having to go back to Middle Tennessee the very next week. But I think Spencer got hurt last week playing Texas A&M. But if I were a coach, I'm not going to sit my players out just because of a conference game next week.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see this rematch here. They held you, as you mentioned, to 89 yards, according to the recap I'm looking at, and they gained 394. So they completely dominated this game after you grabbed a 3-0 lead in the first quarter. Then they scored 13 to lead by 10 at half, and then took it from there in the second half. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So I'm guessing the conference championship game is going to be at noon. It typically is, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's usually like an ABC game or a ESPN2 game. We'll be able to find it somewhere.
It's going to be on CBS, SN.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we're in good shape regardless. All right. I will most likely have to keep an eye on the game while I'm watching the Big 12 championship, but I'll also tape it so I can watch it uninterrupted.
It looks like I'll have to drive 3 hours to Middle Tennessee just to watch the game.
Oh, so you're going to go to the game. What kind of drive is that for you?
3 hours.
Okay. That's not too bad. To go see.
So, what do you think?
Yes, sir.
Did you watch the LSU Texas A&M game?
I did not. I do not have the SEC network, and I didn't see any of the game.
That game was just no defense at all. No defense at all.
Well, it was also 31-31 at the end of regulation. So there was defense in the game. It's not like it was 74-72 and they only played regulation time.
Yeah. So what did you think about Notre Dame struggling with USC?
I don't think it's anything different than what we've seen out of Notre Dame a number of times this year. They played a similar game against Northwestern, and nobody's thinking that Northwestern is ready to play in the college football playoff. They're not going to crush everyone every week. I think Notre Dame is not one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. I think they're a slightly lesser team than that, but they've earned going to the playoff. They've played a very difficult schedule, and they've won the games. I think USC came out and played extremely well, much better than what we've seen in recent weeks out of USC. But Notre Dame finally took control of the game late and won by a touchdown on the road against a very talented team, but a team that was also very banged up and missing some of their best defensive players in that game. So Notre Dame was very fortunate not to face USC at full strength.
Yeah, I think it was a very good game, but I think USC had a couple of turnovers that kept them from winning the game.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Do you think UCF can make the playoffs since a couple of top 5 teams lost?
I think we talked about this last week, and I think that teams have to lose 2 games for them to make the playoffs. So you need Northwestern and Texas to win conference championships next week.
I can see Texas winning that game again.
Oh, I could too.
I don't think don't think Northwestern can beat Ohio State.
Oh, they could. It's unlikely. I'll give them a 10 or
unlikely.
15% chance of winning. Clemson would be the one team that could lose and still make the playoff besides the SEC loser. So you want Alabama to win, to knock out Georgia. And then
that's my other team, yeah.
Clemson's going to get in regardless if those other things happen for you. So let's say Clemson's in and Alabama's in. Then you get, let's say Ohio State wins. You're expecting them to win. Yeah. So if you get the other upset, I would think that Central Florida, despite the quarterback situation, should get, I don't know if they will, they should get the nod over a bunch of 2-loss teams like Georgia.
I don't know.
Yep.
I don't think they'll win their conference game unless they're a good quarterback.
You don't think they're going to beat Memphis?
No, not with their backup.
Okay. Well, you were just asking me what was going to have to happen for them to make the college football playoff.
Yeah, because I got some friends that are Central Florida fans, and that's all they talk about.
Yeah.
So, are you going to be doing the preview for the conference championships this week?
I will. I'm going to get to as many as possible.
All right. I'll be going to the conference game, so I'll keep you updated with it.
Awesome. I love that.
Right.
Thanks so much, Beast. We appreciate it. And good luck to your Blazers.
All right. Thank you.
That was Beast. He's a big UAB fan, and he's going to make the journey up to Middle Tennessee to see if his boys can avenge today's 27-3 loss, but they're still in the conference championship game at 7-1. Of course, UAB played Texas A&M last week, and they were in the game for much of the game before losing by about 21 points. All right, this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And yes, over the next several days, my number one goal here is going to be to preview and predict conference championship games. That's number one. Number two is, because I've taken so many game notes, I'm going to produce videos on a number of the games that we saw with a spin ahead toward what's next for these teams, whether that's off season or a bowl projection or a conference championship game. Right now, we've got Utah storming back against the BYU. They were down 20-0. It's now 27-21 BYU. And we've got Boise State up on Utah State at 20-17 at home. Both these games are in the fourth quarter, and that's what I'm going to take in right now. Hope you had fun this weekend watching college football. It was great to have games from Thursday through Saturday. And, of course, we'll talk it up starting tomorrow at SD1 Sports at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Join the live stream then. And I'll be back later in the day with my top 25, my prediction on the college football rankings. And then, of course, yes, the conference championship games. Ohio State, Northwestern, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Pitt, Oklahoma, Texas in the rematch. And then, of course, we've got Washington taking on Utah, even if the Utes lose this one, and also the group of 5 included. Always appreciate the support. You guys are the best. You guys keep me going. And we will see you soon right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.